What's one phone call that we always dread making?
Customer support.
You know how the story goes. You put off asking a question for a long time.
But now it's essential to get it answered.
So you call into the support line and press all those buttons to enter in all your information.
Knowing full well that when you finally get to a real human,
They'll just ask you all the same questions again.
don't get me started, it's such a frustration.
And businesses rarely seek to do anything about it,
So customers become content with the status quo.
where being herded around as mere satisfied sheep is the norm.
But satisfied customers aren't enough.
What you're really after is loyalty and enthusiasm.
Let's see how we get there in Raving Fans, a revolutionary approach to customer service.
Welcome back. You're listening to Motivation Minute, where we unravel the timeless truths in a stack of books you've been wanting to read so that you don't have to. This week's book is Raving Fans, a revolutionary approach to customer service by Kenneth Blanchard and Sheldon Bowles. And you know, Kenneth Blanchard also wrote The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, which was a fun book we covered probably a couple months ago.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Yeah, I thought this book was pretty simple, or it kind of had a simple concept all about customer service, and it's kind of a cliche that we hear. Customer service is number one, and you always hear business owners say that customer service, blah blah blah. But this book talks about how do you actually get not just a satisfied customer, but raving fans.
And raving fans is a big deal because most of us are just satisfied with how things are. We aren't that interested in changing things because it's just we assume customer service is always this way, where today when we call someone, we don't expect an answer quickly, we don't expect it nicely, we don't expect a polite person. Like, we expect it to be a rough experience, and we set the bar so low so that we just don't get disappointed.
Yeah,
like, disappointment's the worst.
Yeah, I would probably most businesses don't have very good customer service. You go in there or they say they do probably on their website, but you talk to them and then they just do the minimum, or the employees are just kind of want to get you're just like a number to them. They're just like, we'll just get you over and done with, and solve your problem and say bye.
And part of that problem is we don't have a good vision for customer service. It's often the most neglected department within a company. And so it's because the customer service doesn't make the money.
Yeah, we think that the customer service
is just like sustaining the people that are already there.
Right, and it's not something that people put a whole lot of thought into. It's easy to say it, but how do you actually how do you put a whole system in place, a whole plan, a strategy for customer service? Because it says you don't just want customers or just average customers. You either want raving fans or no customer at all. And I've experienced it in my business. The customers, which you could call them lukewarm customers, whatever. They'll come and they'll see what you have, or they'll talk to you, but then they always try to get a special deal, or they always kind of complain about the price, or they're just not really fun to work with. And you just don't. It's better just to not even deal with those customers. It would be better just to not worry about them and just be like, hey, we'd rather not do business with you. But you want really, really, how do you get the raving fans, really, really good customers?
Well, the first pillar that was talked about in the book for getting great customers or raving fans was vision. And it had two parts. The first was, as a business owner, you have to create a vision of perfection that is centered around the customer, not around the product you're designing. And you want to assume the best out of every customer you talk to and put yourself in their shoes and say, what would you want if you were the customer? And then the second part is figuring out what the customer's vision is. Because you may have vision, but the customer has a couple things they're interested in, not usually more, just a couple. And if they get those two things filled, they're happy. But then you can bring it over the top and make them raving fans by filling your vision in the cracks.
Interesting. So you want to like pre-engineer how the customer experience should be. Like
Yes.
basically have a whole system in place, like visualize what the whole customer experience should be like. How do you make them feel good, and how do you deliver a lot of value, and how do you do that consistently? You have to experience, if you were a customer, what would you appreciate about it? If, people being nice to you, or maybe you should have free samples for the customers.
Yeah.
If you don't have something that they need, recommend a place exactly where they can get it somewhere else. And how can you do that consistently? So that means you'd have to train other people to have that same vision as well.
Right. And you talked about making people feel good, which is like that's an amazing thing to do, because the reason it works is people love being treated well. Like if you're treated like a king, you feel extremely good, no matter how small the gesture was to get you there. The simplest thing as giving someone a bottle of water when they enter the business, like, can make them feel human and make them feel, well, more than human, a king, versus just being, left to figure it out themselves.
Something that simple as handing them something like water or something, when they walk in the door. Something that's unique.
What does that cost you? What?
Right.
20 cents? It's just nothing, hardly.
It'd be the thought that counts. So like something that's unique that other places aren't doing. Like I think it mentioned something like have like a massage chair or something, or like have something special or for your customers, or something that makes
give them choices they didn't realize they could even choose between. Like it makes them think, oh wow, this is a whole different level than I thought it was.
Yeah, but you can't just do it. You can't just do it for a little bit. Like it said, you have to do it over and over again. They have to always have the same experience when they come, before they can be a raving fan. Like before they're going to be a huge fan, they're going to have to know that they can always expect the same experience.
And part of that expecting the same experience is the consistency you have, because customers count on your consistency. If you're not consistent, that's what makes them turn off and not want to be a fan. And so what this book was saying is, at the very least, do less, but be consistent about that less that you're doing.
Exactly. It's do less. So that would mean under promise and over deliver, or basically do more than what you promised, not the other way around. Because a lot of times people will promise, or that
most of the time
that you can.
We will overpromise, because we want, because the more you tell someone you're going to do for them, the better they feel. But that means their expectation is higher, and inevitably something doesn't work.
Yep.
And you can't fulfill it all, and then they're disappointed.
I found it's a lot better to just under promise. Like, oh, I know I could do this level of work, but I'm going to go a little bit lower. I'm going to promise them a little bit lower, so that if we get that done, it'll still be all right. But maybe we'll do a little bit better than what we promised. Yeah,
and I actually ran into this consistency issue last week. I made a code change in a repository that like everybody uses at work, because I was thinking, hey, I'm making an improvement on this process we were doing, and I was making it go at least, I think, 30% faster than it already was, and it was a lot more efficient and less bugs in my solution. But when I made that change, I raised a lot of eyebrows, because it was a pretty significant change in terms of everybody seeing it. And the first time I made the change, it broke things. So that people are like, hey, your change broke our software builds. And I'm like, ooh, that's not good. And so I quickly made a fix for it. But it was an uphill battle from then on, because it wasn't perfect the first time. And what I learned from that is I have to be really careful about getting the change right and testing it before I ever make something, be official the way it's released.
Oh, absolutely. That's huge. I have another story. Just recently, I had talked to somebody about possibly doing some work for them, a video, and they were really excited about it. They were like, oh, yeah, we'll absolutely work with you. Just give me a price, and no problem, So I contacted them. I gave them a price for the work that we had discussed, and then they replied back and said, oh, that's, way too much. We can't afford that. So I said, okay, well, we can. I'll gave them a little bit of a deal, but I said, well, we'll do less work. We'll do this amount of work. We can start off with maybe doing less for obviously a lower price.
Yeah.
And they replied back and still said, oh, that's that's basically the same price as before, only you're doing less work. So obvious, and they kind of had a attitude of just like, they just weren't thankful at all, or they just like, which is all right, but they seemed a little bit disappointed and stuff. But if I would keep lowering my price, like, oh, I'll give you a lower price for that, eventually they might work with me, but they'd still probably had that attitude of like, oh, you're charging too much, or
because it was not consistent pricing.
Yeah.
Like
right.
At the level they were expecting.
So it's better. So I just ended up probably not working with them, and which is fine. I'd rather work with people like someone else who I actually priced, which for actually a higher price for a different job, and they were really excited about the price. They're like, yeah, they were totally fine with it. They thought it was great, and they're still waiting to approve it for their board or something. But they're really positive, and they really like the work that I've done before, and so it's a lot better to work.
That's a lot better way to start.
It's a lot better to work with those types of people. I mean, sometimes you have to, but I don't think price is the thing that matters. It's not your price isn't going to make whether they're going to be a fan or not. It's going to be their experience and how they know you personally. Like the other people that I priced knew me a little bit better. They had seen some of the other work I've done, and so they were kind of already fans, or before I gave them a price. Whereas the other guy didn't hardly know anything about me, even though I priced him lower. He thought it was still too expensive. So I don't think it's the price that decides whether you have good customers or not. It's the experience and how they feel when they about you.
And their upfront reaction to price could be a factor, like the first group that wasn't happy with the price, and then you kept lowering it to try to bring them on board, but they're like, it still is too high, and you're not moving enough. Like those are kind of frustrating to deal with compared to people who are like, yeah, meets the values I'm trying to do at a reasonable cost. Like, let's go for it.
Yeah, and so it's better to actually just like not try to work with those types of people that are not the good customers. That are not fans. Like you. And
that's a tough thing to do, because our preference is to work with everybody. But and to work with the people who are in the middle are like not able to make a decision. But what was interesting in this book was it's like you either take the middle people and you make them incredibly raving fans, or you ignore the people who aren't going to be fans. Don't worry about the people in the middle if they're not moving. Exactly.
So true. Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you just have a bad attitude and be like, oh, I'm not working with you, just because your job as a business owner is to serve the customer and give them value, But it is an exchange. They're giving you value as well with their money, and so it has to be an equal trade where you're happy to work with them, they're happy to work with you. You're not just like doing something to make them happy, and you're not their slave. You're it's an equal exchange.
Right.
But you do want to go above and beyond. Like it talked about just doing 1% extra makes a huge difference. So it's like,
and 1%,
right? How could I do just a little bit something in my business that would show that I care? Just a little thing, and that's over time that shows them, wow, these people are not just trying to sell me a product and leave. Like they actually care about helping me.
And why 1%? Like we've talked about this before, the 1% rule in general, like try to improve yourself 1% a day. And it seems so easy to do, but it would not make a big difference. But the key behind it, this book was talking about, was it empowers you, because you're either going to be hopeful now when you think about 1%, because you face an obstacle that seems impossible. Now there's hope. You just get a 1% better, 1% over the obstacle today.
Yeah.
And then you try or this week. And then at the end of the year, you're 50% if you do 1% a week.
Yeah.
And that's great. Or if you think that there's so much to do, it's too much, 1% keeps you on track and says, like, here's what you should do really well, this little bit, and stay consistent.
Yeah.
And you're still 50% better, and you'll have ideas for how to improve things later.
Exactly. Yeah, just doing, like, you don't have to go, that's the thing, is I think we feel like we have to please the customer and do something amazing for them. No, just doing a little bit.
Small tokens.
Or even just being consistent at giving them a good experience. You know, it's like a lot of places you go in and sometimes the people are nice and sometimes they're not, you know, but
Yeah.
if you could have a experience that's absolutely consistent every time with just a little bit extra, something slightly unique about them that makes you come back. And over time, I think you become a fan, not just like the first time you see them. Like it takes a while to warm up to a business or a company or people, and eventually you like get to know them, and once you get to know them, I feel like that's when you get to be a fan or of them, you know, whether it's a product or a company or whatever.
It's the human touch. It's not just an exchange of money. It's an exchange of between people at that point.
Exactly.
And it makes it all human.
Yep.
So why don't we jump into a little discussion on Raving fans while we're here? Who's your biggest Raving fan?
I don't know about like biggest, but yeah, I have. I know a friend of mine who I did some work for like 3 years ago, and over time, like it paid off for them big time. Or the videos that I made for them, just over time helped them sell a lot of products, and like since then they become even just bigger fans over time, and now they want to do work with me again.
Cool.
So
what do you think you learned from that you could apply to other clients you're working with?
I think that it takes a while to create a good following or a customer base, or they have to see the results. Like after working with you for a few years, they get to be fans. Like I think it takes a couple of years of doing business before you get to know your customers, or like get to know who your customers are, or what your average customer is like. And I think that's what I learned from that, is it just takes time.
And that's an interesting point, because the tendency in this, when you apply a book like this, is to think, oh, great, I've got all these ideas to make Raving fans, let's just go do it. But it doesn't happen right away. The book was even bringing up it takes months, because you have to build trust again. People don't trust you today just because you read the book. And so even more so, you got to actually put it in practice, and then they have to start to forget how you let them down in the past. So well, maybe you didn't even let them down. You just have to build an expectation in them for the level of service you're going to give them.
Exactly.
So mine is at work. There's a team I work with that is a systems engineering team. They do a lot of testing of the software that I write. And what's been fun is there's a guy on this team who always needs new software from me, like at least once a week when he's testing, it seems like. Or it's often every day they're updating software and they need something new from me. And because they have to make sure that anything engineers changed still works when it's all coupled together. And what's been cool is I've gotten this down to where he can call my desk and say, hey, I need this new version of a software. I say, I'm on it. And in 15 minutes, I've downloaded the software to my thumb drive, made my way all the way across our campus, which is like a 5-10 minute walk, to a lab building, climbed up into a Humvee to load software onto that shelter, plug my thumb drive in, load the software. Within 15 minutes, I've got multiple shelters on the same software. That's the new one he requested. And it's so cool because what that does is it breaks down the barriers of time that people think there is between things. Like they think, oh, I call the engineer, he's not going to get me my software for at least an hour or until later today. I show up in 15 minutes and they can test right away.
Wow.
That's a big deal for them. And I make that smooth. They like that process, and I enjoy it because I get rid of a barrier they thought was there, and it makes it so that it's more seamless up with and down the chain.
Well, in a sense, when you're working for someone else, like they're in a way they're your customer, because it's like they're paying you to work for them. They're your client, kind of. So it's like it says, don't forget to build a vision of the type of service you'll provide for your internal customers as well as external. So I think that's talking about as like whether maybe that's your employees in your own company, like how do you provide them? Like, how do you provide service to them as well? Or maybe it's, or to your boss, or to,
Right.
and so like doing that over time, like giving those good results to your employers or whatever, that will create them, or that will make them be a fan of your work, right? So they'll, like, after a while,
which makes them speak well of you
Right.
Among each other and networking across the business, which is really good because increases your opportunities.
Yeah. If they become fans of you and they always mention, hey, Spencer's so good at this software thing or whatever, this or that, that could promote you up in the company or whatever in the future. Like, and it might take time, but the fact that you always seem to have done, a little bit above and beyond compared to everybody else that works there over time, like, I think that adds up.
And this idea of like your raving fan can be people above you, not just customers. That was my takeaway from this book, because from my context, that's where I'll be applying it. And it's interesting because that's how you get people on your side. If you make them rave about you and the work you do. And the way you make them rave about you is doing less than you want to, but doing that less better than you thought you could have if you did everything.
Wow.
And
that's huge.
If you make that less really consistent, that's the key.
Wow. So true.
Man, this was a great book. Really like this. We hope you liked this book as well. And if you haven't already, tap subscribe, and we'll make sure that you get an episode like this every single week. Thank you for your responses on the survey. As you've heard in some previous episodes, we've had some listeners coming on the podcast that wrote into the survey, and they've been able to get some books featured that they've been reading. You can do the same if you just go to motivationminute.com and tap survey, and we would love to hear from you.
Awesome.
So thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
See ya.